I'm joined here by Aron Bennett, my best mate, and I'm sorry I'm laughing a little bit. This is a bit unusual for us. Anyway, Aron is the author of 3 books about mental health, and he's joining me today to talk to me about his 3 books. So, hello, Aron. Nice.
Hiya.
You all right?
Yeah.
Good. Would you like to talk to me about your first book, which I believe is called My Sweet Sertraline?
Actually, it's called The Walking Worried. But...
Is it? Oh, that's the first book that you wrote. I should know that, really, shouldn't I, as your best friend?
And you're in it as well.
And I'm in it as well, yeah. So I should probably...
A little bit. You're not...
I'm not the main character, am I?
No.
Are you the main character in it?
I'm the main character because it's autobiographical.
Yeah, well, that makes sense then, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that. But it's actually focusing on mental health aspects of your life, or is it sort of...
Yeah, I mean, no one's going to be interested in my life.
Right.
Because I'm not famous or haven't achieved anything of notoriety.
Right, don't be so down on yourself. You're a good chap. Yeah, carry on.
Yeah, I've got good GCSEs.
Yeah.
They're not in. I'm not mentioning my GCSEs in the book.
No, okay.
No. So the book is about my experiences with mental health.
Right.
Because an authentic account has to come, I think, from my own subjective experiences because I can't well talk about other people's experiences. So and I did sort of, in all seriousness, wonder whether or not it was too egotistical to write about myself, but it's a subject I find easy to talk about. So I used it to the advantage, hopefully, of the people reading and maybe even being able to, resonate with the subject. So the book is about my experiences with OCD.
Okay.
Which is obsessive compulsive disorder.
Right.
And I think, like some other mental health conditions that are perhaps more widely spoken about, like depression, OCD is one of those that's sort of starting to sort of come into the fore. People are talking about it, which is good, because OCD, although it forms in very similar ways across different people, the manifestations are actually quite different.
So a lot of people will, when they hear the acronym OCD, will kind of just think of that sort of the cliche of, I check the taps to make sure they're not dripping, or I check the doors to make sure they're locked.
Which I do.
Oh, you do? Okay, so is that actually OCD, or is that just a kind of overused saying?
It's an overused saying.
Right.
I try not to be too sensitive about when people say, oh, I'm a little bit OCD, but I think it would be remiss of me not to correct people when they do say stuff like that, because OCD is not a quirk. It's not something that you can sort of have momentarily throughout the day and then not have to worry about it for the rest of the day. It's a pathological disorder that really does affect your life and causes quite a lot of suffering.
Your OCD, your particular pattern of OCD, how does that manifest?
Well, my OCD is sort of a cross between a number of lesser well-known types of OCD, if you like, although the pattern is always very similar, and that is puro, which a long time ago people used to think didn't come with its compulsions, but actually puro is almost sort of fully cerebral, but you do have the obsessive thought, and the obsessive thought could be, I'm a bad person, or I did something and it might have hurt somebody, and the compulsion, which is still in your head, is really about trying to take that anxiety away. Just like when you wash your hands because you're worried you've contaminated yourself and thereby might contaminate somebody else. You're trying to cleanse yourself, but the thoughts that are sort of invoked are compulsive thoughts. So there'll be things like trying to work out whether or not you did something bad, making rules up for the future, seeking reassurance. These are all compulsive activities, but a lot of them are hidden.
Okay, so how much of your what proportion of your day do you think is occupied by obsessive thoughts?
Well, without the CBT that I've had, which is cognitive behavioural therapy, it's like talk therapy, tries to get you to change your behaviours and thereby change your thoughts, and without the drugs I take, which is sertraline, I would probably be spending a good 50% of the time. It's difficult to quantify, but it's always there. And now I still get those intrusive thoughts, as I think we all do. But like everybody else, I'm able to bat them away, so that when you have a thought, like, for example, you could be walking along I don't know, the platform of a railway station.
Mm.
And I think everybody can resonate with this. What happens if I push a person into the railway
Right.
tracks just as a train is coming,
Yeah.
and thereby killing them?
Okay.
But the difference between somebody who hasn't got OCD and somebody who has is that the person who hasn't got OCD will accept that's just a random thought,
Right.
and move on, and it won't even filter into their conscious mind. Whereas someone with OCD will say, why did I have that thought? Does that make me a bad person? How do I know I wouldn't do it?
Right.
The questions that emanate from that one errant thought,
Yeah.
can lead to a whole nexus of both physical and cerebral behaviours. So that's the difference.
You mentioned that you had CBT and you're also on sertraline.
Yeah.
Do you think they both had an equal effect on your treatment, or do you think one's more effective than the other in your personal experience?
Yeah. In my personal experience, sertraline has been perhaps more effective than CBT. However, I'm not saying that from a completely neutral stance, because I have had CBT, and I started CBT a lot sooner than sertraline. And so I would say that for most people, a combination of the two is probably the best mix. I think that medication is a good adjunctive, but I do think you need the grounding, and I think you need to appreciate that you have an errant way of thinking, and so you must try to think in a different way to combat that disorder.
There's quite a stigma attached to taking antidepressants and other medication for mental health disorders. And in fact, I watched a BBC documentary the other day about sertraline, saying that it had side effects when people, came off it. They became emotionally detached and that sort of thing. Were you aware of these sort of contentious issues before you started taking sertraline? What are your views on those issues?
People are used to the horror stories of, say, the 1960s and earlier, when people started taking antidepressants, because that's what these drugs are essentially. They're antidepressants.
Okay.
But they weren't targeted years ago, and it did zombify you. And I think that people wrongly, I feel, assume that if there's a problem in your head, then it's more to do with thoughts and you as a person,
Right.
as opposed to the biological mechanism that is the brain.
Right.
And I see it as any other organ. If you've got an organ that is playing up or is making you ill, you treat it.
Can we move back to The Walking Warrior a little bit? What is the kind of flavour of the book?
It's autobiographical, as I've already sort of outlined.
Yeah.
But it's psychoeducative too.
Right.
So whilst there are some brilliantly funny
yeah.
moments in this,
Right.
usually with you involved.
Of course.
I'm only joking.
Yeah.
You're quite boring.
Yeah, I'm quite a
the
boring
story.
character in it, aren't I?
You
Yeah.
are. It's psychoeducative, so
Okay.
there's plenty of research from journal articles and textbooks on
Yeah.
OCD. Whilst I don't profess to be a scientific expert, I think it's only fair to include some of that stuff. What I want it to do is resonate with people, and I don't think that dry textbooks are always the best way of doing that.
So would you like to give us a little bit of a read of the book, a passage from the book that you think really sells it to the audience?
Well, I'll give you a bit that I think gives you a flavour of what it's like.
Yeah, that's probably a better way of putting it.
Maybe it's not as personal.
Yeah, as some of the parts.
In it.
Okay.
But then I think some of those personal bits probably need context. And
I am going to leave a link to these books down below. You can get on Amazon. You can get a little preview of each of these books to see whether or not you think that they're something that you might want to read. By all means, Aaron, please carry on.
OCD is also not a personality disorder, nor is it linked to a particular type of background or upbringing. Like many illnesses, it is an affliction often pre-existing outside of our control, though that is not to say that attitude and lifestyle do not play a part. Quite crucially, they can be instrumental in recovery. I did not cause my OCD, but I can choose to end it. It is a comforting appraisal. It is also an empowering one. It took me a long time to realise that my OCD was not my fault. It took me even longer to learn that I had it in me to reverse the symptoms of it. Whenever I am feeling down or struggling with obsessive thoughts, I will always refer to one particular book on OCD that had changed my whole perception of the disorder, Brain Lock by Dr. Jeffrey Schwartz. This defying work impressed upon me the efficacy of self-directed behavioural therapy. It explained quite neatly how OCD was nothing more than a genetic disposition, a set of false messages from the brain, but that these could nearly always be overcome by reference to 6 tiny little words. It's not me, it's my OCD. The phrase was actually coined by one of Schwartz's very own patients, and could not, to my mind, sum up the position more perfectly. These inspirational words have given me great comfort over the years. I have learned through such new appraisals to tame the voice of doubt that exists conterminously, yet distinctly within my head, as well as to accept the dichotomous nature of life with OCD. I am me. I am also my OCD. It is this contradiction which defines me, and yet it is this contradiction which has also best lent itself to recovery, a journey which through blood, sweat and tears has enabled me to triumph, at least in part, over what might otherwise have been an entirely unconquerable enemy. If there's one piece of advice above all else that I can offer, then it is this: keep on fighting. Never stop trying to be well. However many times you might fall off the wagon or relapse, it is never too late to change or to start chipping away again. It is never too late to quieten the voice of that pesky, unwanted travel companion we all know as OCD.
You write very, very clearly, and it's very impressive, because that was the first book you've ever written, am I right in saying?
Yeah.
How did you sort of hone your writing skills? Have you been writing secretly for years without telling me? Or is this really your first attempt at writing a book?
It'd be a lie to say it's my first attempt at ever writing anything.
Right.
I've kept a sort of diary on and off ever since I was at sixth form, because I found life quite interesting.
Right.
And I also didn't want to let go of some of the experiences. I wanted to treasure them.
So do you think that these books perhaps are in part therapy for OCD? Do you get something back, some kind of catharsis from writing this that helps?
Well, it's definitely cathartic. I like talking about things that have happened because it helps me to make sense of them.
Right.
And it also helps me to see things more clearly in perspective.
Right.
So yes, it's definitely cathartic. And as I sort of continued writing from those scrappy diaries that I kept during sixth form, I found I enjoyed actually putting sentences together. I enjoyed the way they sounded. I suppose it's not too different to people who enjoy writing and reading poetry.
Right.
And I don't just like writing, I like reading, and I like learning new words. I like listening to people using words. So I guess in the same way that Stephen Fry has often said he's in love with words and literature, I've become that way.
Obviously we've been friends a long time, and I remember you were quite intense at that period in your life. I could tell that something was wrong, but I probably didn't put a label on it.
No.
Did anybody sort of kind of offer you advice, say perhaps you should go and see somebody?
Yeah, they definitely offered advice that I should see somebody because of the distress it was causing me.
Right.
I think they realised, they saw through the hollow nature of OCD, and can I say, that's the one good thing about OCD. It doesn't take long for somebody who's listening to somebody with OCD to make their mind up that actually that person isn't bad or isn't dangerous, because you only have to listen to the way they're talking to know that actually they're feeling very guilty and they're feeling very anxious, and they are the opposite of the things that they worry about.
Yeah.
People didn't know what it was. People think that OCD is just about washing and checking, but actually it's anything to do with anxiety being alleviated by some form of compulsive measure, and that compulsive measure could just be reassurance. So the anxiety could be, what if I'm an awful person? The compulsion will be trying to work it out, make rules, and ask people's help. So people could appreciate that there was something wrong, but they didn't know that it was OCD. But they did point me in the right direction and say, well, you should go and see a doctor. Do
you think that your friends and family found your condition challenging? I know it's not really something that I've heard talked about.
No.
When you talk about mental health, people talk about how it affects the individual suffering.
Yeah.
But my sense of your particular OCD, and it's probably shared by a lot of different types of OCD, is that it's actually quite challenging on the people around you.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah, it can be. The reassurance seeking can be annoying. And you probably know that because I've probably asked you the same question a million times.
Well, it's kind of the same question a million times in a million different ways, and just seeking permanent reassurance.
If you could vary it so that actually the answer that you gave previously isn't exactly 100% covering all bases, then there's still room for doubt.
Yeah.
I think, going back to how my parents and family have reacted to it, they are used to me.
Right.
And I'm not completely separate from my OCD. It's not as if it comes out of a clear blue sky.
No.
I think you have to be on the anxious side of the fence.
Right.
Somebody who has never been concerned about themselves or others ever is unlikely to suddenly be struck down with this pathological guilt and anxiety and over-responsibility.
Right.
But, it was triggered at a point in time.
Yes.
There was plenty of time in my life where it didn't exist. The one thing that I did experience was sort of childhood ruminations, if you like, and compulsive behaviours that did eventually get seen to by a psychologist. Most people with OCD have some remnants of it when they're younger.
Right.
Now, sometimes it's diagnosed, but back in, say, 1996, when I first started displaying signs of OCD, they didn't want to put a label on it. They didn't want to create the stickiness of labels effect.
Right.
But so I think my parents had a sense of it, put it that way.
So those early indications was this tap checking and things like that. Okay.
Yeah, so there was a pitter-patter of steps on the upstairs landing that eventually drew my parents' attention. They knew that something was up. And when they found out that I was constantly checking the taps, they tried different methods to get me to stop, basically.
Right.
One of them was bringing me down one night to look at a book about how babies are made.
Right.
I was a bit young to learn about the birds and the bees, so they skipped the sex bit.
Yes.
The coitus.
Yes, thank you for shit.
That's okay. And just showed me these pictures of embryos, and there was this sort of 26-week-old embryo, which at that stage can grimace and do all sorts of things, and even do the sort of peace sign and stuff like that. Intentionally to show me, to try and distract me, to give me something else to focus on.
No, I mean the embryo. It wasn't doing that intentionally.
I know, it wasn't Churchill's grandson, no.
No. You got quite a positive reaction to your first book, didn't you?
Because I think it was authentic, and I think people could resonate with the subject. Because at that time, actually, hadn't been done to death. And I'm not saying that we should stop writing about mental health conditions, but there are a lot more books out there now than there were then.
Do you think this book is a good way for people to really get into the mind of somebody with OCD, imagine what it's like to actually live with OCD?
Yeah, I think that a lot of the textbooks that exist out there are written by clinicians, clinicians who do a very good job. They can only talk about symptoms, and that's very objective. It's also a bit dry. I think if you've got OCD, there are so many more things than just the dry symptoms of the condition. What does guilt do to you on a day-to-day basis? That sort of stuff is missing from textbooks.
We have talked for what seems like hours, and I've just realised there's a clock in the background.
So everyone's going to know how many outtakes there are.
How many outtakes and how many mistakes we've made. But never mind.